Hey everyone, Vance from the Gleemen here. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of background of what's going on with this week's video and last week's video. They were originally one video, but we split them into parts because we felt it was just a little too long to be going on and on and on and on about a topic. So we decided to split it into parts. I found a logical kind of stopping point. So in this week's video, we will continue talking about Altara and Ebudar for the first part of it, and then we're going to transition into different subjects after that, which is another reason I wanted to cut it, is it kind of got a little off topic at the end, but there wasn't a better cutting point there. So either way, thanks for coming in to check it out. I appreciate it. I hope you like the video, and I hope you stick around for more content. Go ahead and like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification because this is kind of an intro slash outro in one. But anywho, I appreciate all the support we've been getting so far, and yeah, have a good one. Back to Tyr and Ilium, we said Tyr is kind of like a mix of, like, if you put Spanish nobility over like Korea in the Joseon dynasty. Ilian, I like get, yeah, for sure. Ilian, I get a little bit of the Dutch feeling, and I really feel like it's not mixed too much with anything else. Maybe Greek. Ilian is like mixed. I got
Greek vibes.
Yeah, I think
at least from architecture and some of their performative cultural aspects felt Greek. Okay, so I think at least their seafaring trade that we know of is definitely based upon Dutch seafaring stuff. Yeah, oh yeah.
And then the rest of their culture seems to be Greek or Mediterranean in general influenced. We can hop on over west now to talk about Altara and Ebudar. Yeah. So Ebudar specifically, that city seems to me to be based a little bit off of a combination of Venice and Istanbul. How do you feel about that?
I don't think I have anything to... I don't think I know enough to disagree.
Okay.
You know, to me, I mean, I'm in essence an engineer who got the wrong science degrees. Yeah. And then worked at a database company, so I'm not nearly as culturally educated. You know, I have a more common parlance cultural education. So to me, Ebudar felt like a cut out of whole cloth, unique place.
Oh, okay. Well, I just thought, you know, they mentioned the canals they have in the city and stuff like that.
Right.
So, and you can see them on the map too, how everything is segmented.
I mean, that's pretty Venetian.
Got the canals. So I thought that was Venice for sure. And then the fact that the city split in two across the river, that's Istanbul, Turkey to me.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So, you know, because they've got the Rahad on one side and then the proper Ebudar, you know, the wealthier, nicer part of the city on the other side with the palace complex. That to me was very evocative.
About life.
Yeah, right. But the palace description in Ebudar was very evocative of like the Hagia Sophia, which is in Istanbul. So just kind of an interesting thing. The culture feels unlike anything from those two places, though. It's totally unique. Very matriarchal led. Their queen is a very strong figure, at least within the city. They don't seem to control much of their land outside of the city. That's more handled by whatever nobility has stakes in the ground.
Right.
But yeah, within the city, it's a very strong matriarchy. So much so that like they even talk about women like killing their husbands with their marriage daggers, which they wear around their neck. So it's always available.
Not vestigial.
Yes, they are very real and functional. Oh, and the Ebudari culture also does knife fights, just like all the time. They have duels. Yeah, they have a strong dueling culture, which I thought was pretty cool. There's definitely some parallels to various cultures of, you know, both Western and Eastern Europe and the Middle East. But for the most part, it's so well blended in that specific city that I have trouble just picking out, oh, this is directly from this. You know, they're a little bit more nuanced. Kind of like the Aiel, where they have like a couple of big things and then everything else is just original to them.
Yeah, yeah. So Ebudar is nice because you get a good depiction, and not a caricature, like not a straw man,
right?
But a good depiction of a very honor-based ethos, cultural ethos, with the duels and the way the women, the way the women consider and handle the marriage knives. They're very realistic about how representing how honor-based cultures really played out, which we saw in early Renaissance and before.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting about Ebudar, how it takes that honor-based system that you're talking about from multiple cultures and really just kind of, that's its main focus, actually. Now that, you've highlighted that, I would say that's one of their main highlights. So to pull it back out just a little bit, there's one thing we want to touch on before we come up on time on this week's episode in this series, and that is the religious unification of the world. In terms of their deistic beliefs. So, Drew, I think you had some thoughts.
On unification, we've talked about this a little, so to put it on screen, it's the Old Tongue, that there is only one Old Tongue, is a stretch to me. Talk about that, because you have the best thought I've heard on that.
Right. So I thought we were going to go the religion thing, but we'll go the language thing. I'll cut. Yeah,
this rolls in.
I'll cut that part out, and I'll cut this part out. So for me, having a singular old tongue, just kind of highlights similar to where we're at now in the world, where they had instantaneous communication in the Age of Legends. They had a diverse cosmopolitan world that had probably been connected and trading and moving around freely, and instantly for hundreds, if not thousands of years. We don't know how long it lasted. And if nothing else, it was at least just a lingua franca like Latin was during the Roman Empire. At various points we have a quote-unquote world language or language of business that is used out there. Right. Similar to the way English is today. English has the most speakers in the world, not as a native language, but as a language as a whole. And
I'll give you that.
That's how I think these things lasted. Now, whether or not there were other languages in the Age of Legends, we don't know. But we do know that the Old Tongue was spoken widely enough and written widely enough that large swaths of it survived into the current day of the Wheel of Time. So it had some significant staying power. Again, whether or not it was a world language that was learned and spoken to be communicated by everybody, or it was a natural progression of the confluence of all languages into one, is a different discussion.
And Jordan does... Early in the series, Jordan seems to handle it a little tropey, as which can be excusable as an old lingua franca. Right. And then later he does add some nuance where Brigitte, in her friendship with Matt, comments that Brigitte.
She's Brigitte. That's how you actually say that name.
Okay, I'll take it. So Brigitte brings out that Matt's Old Tongue utterances vary very widely in their origins. Mm-hmm. Her being aware of all of her past lives.
Right.
Whether she's catching on to these are distinct languages, or whether there are idioms or nuance, accent nuances she's commenting on. He acknowledges some diversity.
Right.
And then in the modern Westlands, actually in the modern whole world, even in Sanshin, and this is where I can't buy, there's still only one language.
Right.
Like, narratively, I get that it's annoying to write about people with different languages interacting. That's complicated, but it's been 3,000 years, guys. It's
been shown language drift. The only reason we haven't seen as much language drift between all of the English-speaking nations as we have right now is because of radio. Honestly.
Oh, yeah.
Coming up about 100 years ago. I think had we not had these forms of near instant communication develop within our time, we would have seen a lot more language drift of the various dialects of English spoken across the English-speaking section of the world. Same with Spanish. there would have been further digression from the mother tongue that it all comes from.
Which is already significant.
Right, yes. I mean, even in South America, all of the Spanish nations down there have very distinct dialects from one another.
Right.
So,
and Spanish didn't cross the ocean historically much earlier than English did. In the grand scheme of things.
Right, yeah. I mean, you're talking about maybe 80 to 100 year head start. So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting to think about that. Now, I'm by no means a linguist by any kind of degree or profession. I have a passing interest in it thanks to J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings and his interest in languages. But, yeah, I do think language drift would have been much more of a thing within the Wheel of Time. It's 3,000 years. There's no language spoken. All right, so we have Chinese, for example, which is a direct continuation of Old Chinese, but it is spoken completely differently. The only reason we know anything about...
Are you talking about Mandarin?
Cantonese? Mandarin specifically, which is like the Beijing dialect that's been standardized as standard Chinese. But yeah, there were different dialects of Chinese, and I mean, some people may even argue wholesale different languages. But that Sino-Tibetan language family has been spoken continuously in China for like 3,000 years at the minimum. And the only reason we know how things happened is because of classical Chinese written characters. The writing system is what unified the language and the culture over time and prevented like ideological drift from their civilization foundings, if that makes any sense. So
an ideographic writing system, although more cumbersome, I can see how an ideographic writing system cements ideological elements of a language over a much longer term than an alphabetic system.
Right. Now, spoken language-wise, there's been massive drift, and there would be no ability for anyone who speaks Chinese today to speak, classical Chinese to someone from any point in history. Like what the Han Dynasty was speaking is completely different from what maybe even the Tang Dynasty spoke.
And what's the time gap between them?
Han Dynasty fell around 180 AD, was like roughly around the start of the Three Kingdoms period, and then the Tang Dynasty starts. I know it's around in like the 900s AD. I can't remember when it specifically starts.
So for sake of time, I'm just going to cut for a quick comment on... because we just made most of the mileage with our conversation about language. It realistically would have drifted a lot. Narratively, it's much easier to consider it as one language.
Yeah, of course.
And just interact. So, in the same sense, religion or spirituality, Jordan presents it as, and not just in text, but even in commentaries, he presents his view as there exists a long-standing tradition capable of demonstrating supernatural or metaphysics. It's not really super, they're natural. A long-standing tradition that exerts and exhibits metaphysical properties, manifestations, and they profess what the metaphysics of the universe are. And so the whole world sees no need for any kind of priestly service, personal effort to interact with spirits or metaphysical personalities, and so they just don't.
Well, I think it goes back to the deistic nature of the way he wrote the Wheel of Time, right? Like, all of the people are aware of the Creator and the Dark One. Like, that's just taken to be general knowledge. The difference in beliefs comes in, like, Myrddraal and Trollocs, where, like, people further down south who are not in the borderlands don't believe they exist. They believe they were the fabrications. You know, I would argue that the Aes Sedai kind of are religious figures and priestly figures within the world. They're not like proselytizing, because the belief in the Creator and the Dark One are deemed to just be real, and Aes Sedai are proof enough that there is at least a one power that people can access and weave into specific spells, magic for lack of a better term, and display that ability. And I mean, you know, they have texts dating from the Age of Legends that state, you know, they're incomplete, they're not 100% there and coherent, but they do have snippets that confirm the existence of these entities, and that when they drilled the bore, which they also have on historical record somehow still, that the Dark One was released and corrupted all of these, you know, heroes of the age to their side. For, I mean, honestly, like all of the Forsaken were relatively, aside from a few of them, were relatively well-known public figures.
Oh yeah.
And you know, who you would consider, they were kind of celebrities and you know, highly publicized researchers, you know, doctors, scientists.
Yeah, I
whatever.
mean, I'll take the historical continuity, because we're only about 6 generations of Aes Sedai away from the breaking.
And then, on top of that, it's another point. Aes Sedai live for centuries. I mean, they don't live as long as they should, but they do live for hundreds of years, 200 to 300 years.
I don't think it's fair to call them a priestly class in the traditional sense, because a priest implies that they're mediating between, you know, a laity, you know, a more secular people and some metaphysical entity. Maybe they're kind of a historical priestly class. I could kind of see that. You know, they provide some continuity.
A clerical class.
Yeah.
To bring out some D&D references.
Right. I don't know. I just feel like humans over 3,000 years would, even if they kept that deistic core, kind of Taoist core philosophy, I think they would have drifted. Yeah,
I wouldn't argue that's Taoist either. I'd argue that's more out of like Zoroastrianism, but we can argue the religious influences on the Wheel of Time in another episode.
Yeah. Well, and it's not even an argument. I'm just fairly ignorant. I think there would have been more drift, and it would have been a little more present in their culture. You know, he chose not to emphasize it,
right,
or to present it.
Well, I think it's the same as the language drift, like you said. Like he just chose to not care about that. I do think there would be greater religious divergence, at least. Maybe not so much that, like, because I mean, medieval Europe is a good example of this, where like once Europe was fully Christianized, it was relatively coherent, but there were pockets of quote unquote heretics, which no one would be deemed nowadays, thanks to freedom of belief and all that from the Enlightenment that everyone now has. But you know.
But Europe was only homogenous because it was militantly enforced.
Exactly.
Orthodoxy was militantly enforced. When you don't legislate
the children of the light.
Yeah. When you don't enforce orthodoxy at the point of a sword, you see very quick, massive spiritual divergence.
Right. Well, I mean, I think that's why he included the children of the light. They control an entire, relatively large nation. They are
the children
allowed,
are the one example of spiritual diversity.
Right. They are allowed in pretty much every nation. We don't really see white cloaks in the borderlands. I think because the borderlanders don't have time for their bullcrap.
Well, and the white cloaks don't want a real challenge.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, down in the southern part of the continent, which is where a lot of the population lives, they're in almost everywhere. You know, little pockets of them moving in and out. You know, whether you know they have writs of permission to be there. from national rulers, you know, whether or not
Yeah.
they have a 100% stellar relationship with them or not. But I would say that's part of the militant enforcement. It's not from the Aes Sedai side, but it's from a completely
Right.
separate organization. That's a good point. So anyway, everyone, thanks for joining us here on the Gleemen. I've been Vance.
Great to see you.
That has been Drew. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and the little bell icon to get notified when we release a new video. That way you don't miss any of our Wheel of Time content. We're starting to ramp up our shorter video production. Drew just had one come out as of today that we are filming this episode.
It was beautifully unbearable.
Yes.
Go see it.
Go see it. It is hilarious. I should have one out on Monday, which will be, you know, before this video comes out, because this one comes out on Wednesday. So, yeah, go check them out. Thanks for watching.
So is it right here? Is Monday right here?
Or here? Left, right, left? Who knows?
Yeah.
So, we'll see. Anyway, thanks so much, everyone, and have a good one.
Bye, guys.
So anyway,
Yeah, I mean, they may not be katanas, but
I think they're
basically-
sabers. Cavalry sabers is what I think they are.
yeah, maybe. But
I think
describes most swords as
Curved.
two-handed, curved
Curves.
blade
Yeah.
swords.
That way, I mean that comes out as saber though in the European tradition as well. Yeah, it does.
Saber. There were no two-handed sabers. Weren't two-handed weapons.
I mean, they made two-handed sabers.
There were. You're really talking more like southeastern Europe, bordering into Turkish territory there. So I mean, you had like shamshirs and stuff, but those are just freaking huge weapons.
The two-handed saber is an oft-overlooked weapon of the Renaissance. This style of sword was popular in Switzerland and southern Germany.